People know Karen. Now, unfortunately, there are women whose names are Karen who are not Karens. And they get offended by Karen. And I've used Karen, and I get hate mail occasionally from people named Karen. My family, we've got one of our family best friends we go to the beach with every year is named Karen. And you're like, you really don't want to use the word Karen to talk about the Karens who are bullying people in the grocery store into wearing masks and stuff like that. There's got to be a better phrase. Overwhelmingly, when people talk about Karens, what they're talking about are the secular, progressive, white, atheist or Episcopalian women who bully the rest of the world. I'm on an email list. I think we can safely retire the word Karen because a person on the email list that I'm on has come up with the perfect acronym. Awful. Awful. Affluent, white, female, urban liberals. Awful. They're awful. It's so brilliant. I hate that I did not come up with this. The awful women of America. The affluent white female urban liberals. They're awful. Jennifer Granholm, who wants to bully you out of your gas stove and into an electric vehicle you can't afford, is awful. She's an affluent white female urban liberal. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's Hispanic, but does she identify as a black Hispanic or a white Hispanic? I bet you I know. She's awful. Nancy Pelosi is awful. Randy Weingarten of the American Teachers Federation, or American Federation of Teachers, is awful. An affluent, white, female, urban liberal. It's the perfect acronym. So out goes the Karens and in come the awfuls. We can now make amends with all the brilliant, wonderful women named Karen who are not affluent, white, female, urban liberals. They are conservatives. They don't go to the Episcopal Church. I'm sorry, Episcopalians. You know I love to make the joke. But it's these white progressive women who are ruining the country. Because the Democratic Party, and in particular, because they've castrated the men of the Democratic Party, you got the women in charge. I mean, if a man wants to be in charge of the Democratic Party these days, he's actually got to identify as a woman, and then they'll let him be on a women's sports team and give him some moral clout. I mean, look at Joe Biden. Jill Biden has her arms so far up the backside, moving his lips. I mean, she might as well be Miss Piggy. I mean, or him, Kermit. It's call her Jim Henson. She's awful. An affluent, white, female, urban liberal, Jill Biden. So much of the administration. Then you've got women who are adjacent to them. You've got the Karine Jean-Pierres and the like. They're not white, but they're affluent, female, urban liberals. Awful, maybe not awful. We can call it awful. It's the entrails of society here ruining things. These white, urban, liberal, overwhelmingly affluent females dominating the Democratic Party these days. And they're driving out everybody else. If you're non-white, you don't want to be a part of a party. The increasing secularization of the United States, all of this stuff. It's a good replacement. I'm sorry I didn't come up with the term. But just think about the policies. Jennifer Granholm is a great example of this. Lena Khan, not technically white, but adjacent. They're trying to drive up your costs. They're trying, not through paternalism, but through maternalism, they're trying to control your choices. They want to decide for you what you're having for dinner. They want you to then clean your plate. They want to decide the car that you can drive. They want to decide the school you can go to. They don't want to give you access to school. Look at Randy Weingarten. Look at these anti-union or anti-school choice activists. Overwhelmingly awfuls, affluent, white, female, urban liberals who don't want your children in their children's private schools. The awfuls have set the parameters of the Democratic Party. They have set the parameters by which the rest of us are supposed to function. And then their children are indoctrinated and brainwashed by them, and they show up where? In places like Atlanta, where they don't bathe and instead they throw Molotov cocktails at police because they don't believe the police should be trained. The awfuls of America don't want your non-white children in their private schools. They are perfectly happy to put boys in girls' sports so long as their girls are not dependent on a sports scholarship. They typically have enough money to write the check to the college. They don't care about your kid and your child's sports scholarship. They're perfectly fine having a boy compete against your daughter. They're perfectly fine castrating boys to make them girls. I mean, the largest part of the transgender movement is a bunch of rich white women who didn't like their husbands, hate men, and have decided their boys should become girls so they don't have to deal with men in their lives. That's a large part of the trans movement. The other part of it is white men who've identified as women, and if it wasn't white men doing it, we wouldn't have to take the movement seriously. But between the awfuls and the white men of America who've decided they want to be awfuls, we got to pay attention to all of it. It's the awfuls of America. They're opposed to school choice. They support boys and girls sports. You're a bigot if you don't go along with it. They don't like the fact that you have so many consumer options. They don't like the fact that you may choose to go to a grocery store and not wear a mask. They don't like the fact that you may buy a truck and jack it up on big wheels. They don't like the fact that you might reject a battery-powered vehicle. They don't like the fact that you eat a cow instead of synthetically grown meat. They want to control your life. They want to control your options. They want to control your children's schooling. They want to deny for you opportunities that their children might have so that you can't compete against their kids. They want to ruin your kids' education so their kids can get ahead. They want to burden you in society. They're awful. Affluent, white, female, urban liberals. And the men and other women adjacent to them. Look at the Robin DiAngelo. All these white women of America who are progressive, secular atheists, who have high incomes in coastal elite areas or suburbs. They want you to read a book on race and racism by a white woman. Not by Ibrim Kendi. No, don't read him. But to the extent that they allow him to come in, who is it? It's the white awful women of America, the upper echelons of progressive society who have given them inroads. And the men they've browbeaten and bullied into doing so. I like the term awful. It's a great descriptor of what we're dealing with. And these awful people are moving many of the non-white members of the Democratic Party to the right. In fact, my buddy Patrick Ruffini has done a pretty good dive into the shifting landscape of Georgia as a swing state. And do you know what he's found? In overwhelmingly non-white parts of the metro Atlanta area in 2022, the non-white voters shifted measurably and noticeably to the right. Not enough to matter. 5% here, 10% there, 7% here. But among the Asian community, the Hispanic community, the black community, the non-white community generally, there was a shift in the blue-collar, non-white voting areas of Atlanta towards the right because they don't want to be in the party with the awful women of America who propped up people like Stacey Abrams. They don't want to be a part of that. The Democratic Party is having to deal with this now. They've made people like Jennifer Granholm and Nancy Pelosi, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, people like that, they've made them the face of the Democratic Party. They're progressive, they're secular, they're deeply hostile to people of faith, they're deeply hostile to traditional values, they come across as a bit of hating on men. They're awful. Affluent, white, female, urban liberals. That's what they are. They're not Karens. Karen can go back to being called Karen. The rest of them, they got to be awful. The ones who harass you in the grocery store because you're not wearing a mask. The ones who drive around town in their car by themselves wearing their masks. They're awful. It's the perfect descriptor of what's happening in America today. And I regret, again, deeply regret, that I'm not the one who came up with the acronym. But I didn't. I can't take the credit. But by God, I'm going to mainstream it. Awful. Affluent, white, female, urban liberals. You can take it for yourself. I don't need the credit because I didn't come up with it. Just use that instead of Karen.